You don't meet anyone by chance. What you feel, what you carry, what's still unresolved, all of it precisely attracts the encounters you experience. This isn't coincidence. It's the law of resonance at work. You attract what aligns with your inner state, whether you're aware of it or not. Even the toughest relationships bring messages the ego refuses to see, but the soul needs to hear. Carl Jung believed that the most important encounters were arranged by the soul long before the bodies ever met. That being said, what are your relationships showing you about yourself? In this video, you'll understand why certain bonds form, why some patterns repeat, and how those seemingly random encounters are actually deep reflections of your own psyche. So watch until the end, because once you understand how the law of resonance operates in your relationships, you'll stop calling coincidence what has always been the language of the unconscious. I believe we've all been through something like this. You're living your life as usual when suddenly someone shows up. A glance exchanged at a coffee shop, a conversation on the subway, a message sent by mistake, and nothing is ever the same again. It feels like a coincidence, but it's not. These encounters that shift the course of things follow no visible logic. They don't go by any plan, algorithm, or control. The feeling is different, like it was already set, like that presence was pulled closer, even without conscious intention, as if there's an invisible thread connecting two human experiences that, until then, lived in separate worlds. Carl Jung said, "Some connections happen before life even gives them a name." That's not poetry. It's a theory about the unconscious. For Jung, something deeper operates beneath the surface of events. A symbolic intelligence that moves us toward what we need to live, learn, heal, or transform. Nothing happens by chance, because chance, in this context, isn't random. It's a language. What you call fate might actually be your unconscious moving in sync with the external world. There's a resonance between you and what you attract. This resonance isn't visible or logical, but it's real. It shows up in the stories that repeat, in the people who arrive holding up mirrors, in the connections that, even if brief, leave deep marks. When someone enters your life and stirs everything up, for better or for chaos, they didn't show up randomly. Sometimes they carry the key to a process that's been locked away for years. Other times, they represent something you haven't yet recognized in yourself. They might be a mirror, a trigger, a messenger, or even a bridge. But they're never neutral, never irrelevant. It's the self, the deepest core of the psyche, that attracts these encounters. It knows what the ego doesn't. It operates through symbols, dreams, synchronicities, and often, it uses the other as a mirror to show us what we can't see alone. When you look more closely at the path your life has taken, you'll notice that the right people always showed up at the most unlikely moments. They weren't always easy or sweet, but they were always precise. The soul recognizes before the name, and when that happens, life's natural course shifts direction. What comes your way is in sync with what's vibrating inside. That's the core of what's called the law of psychic resonance. The idea that our outer experiences, especially human encounters, reflect the inner states of our psyche. It's not just about energy in the esoteric sense, but about emotional, symbolic, and unconscious vibration. You attract what matches the psychic frequency of your inner field. That includes your wounds, your unmet needs, your unacknowledged desires, your unresolved traumas, your repressed parts. The other often shows up as an emotional mirror reflecting exactly what you haven't been able to see or embrace in yourself. That's why certain people touch you deeply, and others don't. Why some relationships feel easy, and others are intensely challenging. The other is reflecting you, even if it doesn't seem like it. This vibration isn't visible or easily measurable, but it translates into symbols, into patterns, into repetitions. The unconscious doesn't speak in a linear way. It speaks in symbols, and the world around you becomes the stage where that language plays out. Situations repeat, types repeat, names, looks, déjà vu sensations. All of it might be the unconscious saying, "There's still something here to be seen." A person's psychic field isn't neutral. It emits signals, even if silently. And those signals unconsciously attract people who vibrate at similar frequencies, or who awaken something that needs to rise. That's why you don't always attract what you want. Often, you attract exactly what you're avoiding, not as punishment, but as vibrational coherence. This law also explains why certain bonds feel inevitable. Even when you try to pull away, something insists. Even when it doesn't make sense rationally, emotionally, it does. The connection happens at a level the mind can't reach. And it's in that realm where the most transformative experiences unfold. Nothing that comes close is random. There's a hidden meaning in the relationships that leave a mark. As unsettling as it may seem, there's precision in the encounters that happen, even the most difficult ones. The outer universe isn't separate from you. It's the most honest mirror of what lives inside. Some encounters complete you, others confront you, but in almost all of them, there's some kind of break, like someone touching exactly the part you usually hide. It's not coincidence. It's psychic complementarity. Carl Jung observed that the ego, by nature, is limited. It builds an identity based on choices, what you decide to be, what you show, what you believe is acceptable. But everything that gets excluded, out of fear, shame, or habit, doesn't vanish. It sinks into the unconscious. And that's exactly what you tend to attract. The mind seeks the balance the ego refuses to acknowledge. And it does this by drawing closer what's missing. The rationale is enchanted by the intuitive. The controlled faces, the spontaneous, the pragmatic meets the dreamer. It's not random. It's the unconscious saying, look what you've left behind. These encounters with the opposite aren't always smooth. Often they bring friction, resistance, even rejection. Because the other is manifesting something you don't accept in yourself. But that somehow needs to be integrated. The attraction comes from the contrast. And it's in that contrast that the potential for growth lives. The relationship with the opposite is an invitation to expand. You find yourself face to face with someone who breaks your patterns, challenges your beliefs, shakes your emotional logic. And at first, it might seem like you're from different worlds. But with time, you realize that difference is showing you something new. It's pulling you out of your comfort zone. It's making room for a more complete you. These encounters aren't mistakes along the way. They're soul encounters. And the soul doesn't seek comfort, it seeks wholeness. For Jung, the path of individuation involves this movement, integrating what's missing, embracing what was denied, expanding consciousness by including the other as part of your own process. When you attract someone very different from you, it's worth asking, what does this person reveal about me? What do I long for but haven't recognized? What have I always admired in others but never dared to develop in myself? The opposite doesn't show up to go against you. It comes to remind you of who you still have the potential to become. And often, love begins when the soul recognizes something the ego hasn't yet learned to name. But not every intense connection is true. Sometimes, what feels like a soul encounter is just the reflection of something unresolved within you. And telling the difference is one of the most delicate tasks of self-awareness. When someone enters your life and you feel an almost inexplicable pull, it's common to think it's fate, but more often than not, what's happening is projection. You're not seeing the person as they are. You're seeing what your unconscious has projected onto them. An old desire, an emotional need, an idealized image that took shape in that face. Projection has a powerful energy. It's loud, impulsive, intoxicating. It sweeps you up too fast. You feel seen in a magical way, like you found someone who understands you without words. But in truth, you're engaging with a part of yourself that's been activated, not with the other person in their reality. Intuition, on the other hand, moves differently. It's quiet, subtle, almost shy. When it's real, there's no rush, no anxiety. There's a calm recognition. You don't feel the need to prove yourself or to hold on tightly. The connection flows effortlessly, without idealization. A good way to tell the difference is by asking the right question. What exactly am I seeing in this person? If the answer comes packed with fantasies, salvation, or a sense of completion, it's probably projection. If it feels more grounded, with presence and openness, it might be intuition. Awareness is the only real filter, and it only turns on when you're brave enough to explore your own emptiness. The person who attracts you is showing you a part of yourself. The question is whether that part is being acknowledged, or just used to fill a void. Many relationships start with projection, and only later reveal what they really are. When the curtain falls, frustration, pain, and anger may surface, but so can clarity. The problem isn't projecting, that's human. The problem is getting lost in the fantasy and not realizing when it's no longer real. Not every encounter is meant to last, but all of them can be revealing. Some arrive to show you where you're still hoping to be rescued, others to remind you that you're already whole. And it's up to you, with presence and attention, to discern where the power of that connection is really coming from. Not everything that shines is a soulmate. Sometimes it's just the echo of an old desire, asking to finally be heard and released. Some people stir up uncomfortable feelings in you: anger, jealousy, irritation, instant dislike. And while your first impulse might be to walk away, judge, or deny, there's something there that deserves to be looked at more closely. Because these intense reactions don't come out of nowhere. They're signs your shadow has been touched. In Jungian thought, the shadow isn't evil. It's everything you don't want to admit is part of you. Traits, desires, impulses, and emotions you've excluded from your conscious identity, but that still exist, lurking beneath. And one of the most common ways the shadow surfaces is through relationships. You reject in others what you haven't accepted in yourself. The arrogant person irritates you because they expose your own repressed vanity. The unstable person unsettles you because they awaken your hidden fragility. The selfish one triggers you because they mirror your buried desire to set boundaries you never dared to create. What affects you says more about you than about them. This doesn't mean every behavior is justified or that you should tolerate everything, but it does mean that before reacting on autopilot, it's worth asking, why is this hitting me so hard? What am I actually feeling? The answer often isn't on the surface. The shadow you attract may show up as criticism, or rivalry, or envy, and the urge to distance yourself is often just a reaction to the discomfort of facing your own reflection, because it's easier to point outward than to integrate what's within. Jung said, "What you deny in yourself appears in others as fate." It sounds harsh, but it's actually liberating, because it shows there's a way forward. You don't have to keep repeating the same judgments, the same discomforts, the same conflicts. You can learn to look at what the other activates in you, and turn that tension into self-awareness. The most uncomfortable relationships can be the most educational, not because they're good or pleasant, but because they reveal parts of you that were buried. And only what surfaces can be worked on, healed, reintegrated. You don't have to like everyone, but you do need to understand why certain people affect you so deeply. Not every conflict is about the other person. Sometimes it's about the part of you that still longs to be seen, even if it hides behind a quick judgment or sharp criticism. You think you're choosing. You believe you're in control of your relationships, that you've learned from past experiences, that now you're different. But without noticing, you find yourself in the same place again, attracting the same kind of person, living the same frustration, facing the same emptiness. That's not bad luck. It's a pattern. And more often than not, it's the unconscious calling the shots. The unconscious repeats what hasn't been resolved. It silently and precisely seeks out situations that resemble those that left deep marks, especially the ones from childhood, from early relationships, from first emotional wounds. And it repeats, not out of cruelty, but because there's still something there that needs to be seen, processed, transformed. You can rationalize it, justify it, promise yourself that this time it'll be different. But if the core wound is still alive, it'll shape your choices. It'll distort your perception. It'll make you think you're falling in love, when really, you're just chasing a chance to heal old abandonment, unprocessed rejection, or the validation that never came. That's how you get caught in cycles, connecting with emotionally unavailable people, staying in relationships that hurt, feeling invisible even when you're not alone. Not because you want to suffer, but because on some level, you're trying to symbolically solve what was never healed. Repetition is the unconscious mind's way of trying to complete what was left unfinished. It recreates the scene, as if saying, maybe this time it'll work. But it rarely does, because healing doesn't come from pushing outward, but from turning inward and seeing what needs care. This isn't your fault. It's psychic structure. And once understood, it can be changed. The key is to observe the pattern with radical honesty. Why do I always fall for people who aren't present? Why do I settle for less than I deserve? Why do I confuse intensity with love? Awareness breaks the cycle, not in a magical way, but in a real one. It creates space for new choices, choices that align with who you've become, not with what you've been through. You're not stuck in your patterns, but to move beyond them, you need to recognize that for a long time, they've been making the decisions for you. And only when that becomes clear does the real possibility for a new story begin. One with relationships that don't repeat the past, but honor who you are now. There's a book that, to me, ties in perfectly with everything we've talked about here. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. If you want a clear understanding of why you attract certain people, patterns, and experiences, this book is a must-read. Murphy explains something that completely changes how we view life. The idea that it's the subconscious mind that truly drives our behaviors, choices, even the people we meet. It doesn't matter what you consciously say you want. If deep down you carry beliefs of rejection, abandonment, scarcity, or unworthiness, that's what's going to resonate. That's what you'll attract. He compares the subconscious to fertile soil. Whatever you plant there, through repeated thoughts, strong emotions, deep beliefs, will grow into your reality. And that's where it all connects to the law of resonance. Because this inner seed vibrates, and that vibration attracts external experiences that match it. Relationships, reunions, patterns, none of it happens by chance. It all stems from what's vibrating inside you, even if you're not fully aware of it yet. What's most fascinating is that Murphy talks about reprogramming the subconscious. In other words, if you change what you believe, if you start feeding it more conscious mental images and emotions, your vibrational field also shifts. And with that, so does what you attract. That realization made me see how most of our relationships aren't rational choices. They're mirrors, external manifestations of everything that still needs healing, integration, or inner strength. So if you feel stuck in cycles, always attracting the same kind of person, or living the same experiences over and over, the power of your subconscious mind might open an important door. It's not shallow self-help. It's a deep, accessible, and practical explanation of how the mind works, and how changing from within starts to change everything outside. If you want to take that next step in understanding your patterns and connections, I truly recommend reading this book at some point in your life. Another truth we need to understand is that not every relationship comes to complete you. Some arrive to remind you that you're already whole. These are connections not built on lack, but on presence. They don't feed fantasies. They don't fill voids. They simply share space. And that alone gives them a deeply healing power. The relationships that heal aren't the most intense or romantic ones. They're the ones where you feel safe to be who you are, without having to perform, where there's true listening, respect for silence, acceptance of your broken parts. In these, the other doesn't try to fix you. They walk beside you as you put yourself back together. These connections awaken what Jung called the healer archetype, an inner pattern that stirs when you're in the presence of someone who listens without judgment, welcomes without trying to mold, sees your pain without fear. Being with someone like that feels like landing in a place where you can finally breathe. But even these relationships can be challenging, because true healing doesn't come from comfort. It comes from presence. Sometimes the other person will show you how far you've drifted from yourself. They'll touch the parts you try to hide, not to hurt you, but to reveal them. And that revelation, when held with affection, begins to reorganize what was fragmented. It's common to expect others to fill what's missing. But in healing relationships, there's no promise of filling. There's mirroring, there's support, there's truth. And that, though more subtle, is far more powerful, because it returns the autonomy that need-based relationships often take away. Healing love doesn't promise to save you. It reminds you of your ability to rebuild yourself. It strengthens you so you can walk with more awareness, not carry you. It holds your hand, but doesn't hold you back. These relationships don't always last a lifetime. Some pass like a season. They bring warmth, they make something bloom in you, and then they move on. But what they leave behind is lasting, because they show in practice that it's possible to connect deeply without losing your individuality. They don't come to fill a hole. They come to remind you of everything you already have and may have forgotten. And from that memory, healing begins. Quietly, without dependence, through presence alone. Every time you connect with someone, something in you awakens. It might be a dormant strength, a forgotten wound, a role you didn't even know you knew how to play. That happens because the other isn't just a person. They're also an activator of archetypes. In Jungian terms, archetypes are universal structures that live in the collective unconscious. They're patterns of behavior, symbolic images, deep emotional blueprints we all carry. When someone enters your life, they can awaken the hero, the caretaker, the rebel, the victim, the sage, the wounded child. And this awakening is rarely conscious at first. You just feel it. You feel like you need to protect someone, or be saved by them. You feel like you've been given the role of guide, or that for the first time, there's room for you to be vulnerable. Sometimes you fall more in love with the role that person activates in you than with the person themselves. And that explains why some connections feel so intense. They put you in touch with hidden parts of your own soul. These archetypes aren't fixed. They shift as the relationship evolves. The same person can make you feel powerful one day and bring you to your knees the next. That doesn't mean the bond was fake. It just means it touched different layers of your being. The person is the spark, but the fire is yours. It's easy to confuse that with love. But often, what's happening is a meeting of internal images. You're not just relating to the other. You're relating to what they awaken in you, to what they symbolize, to what they emotionally represent. That's why certain encounters leave such a mark. Not because the story lasted, but because they activated a part of your soul you didn't know how to name. And once awakened, that part doesn't go back to sleep. It transforms the way you see, the way you connect, the way you exist. These activations are part of the individuation journey, because through them you begin to meet, little by little, the many voices living inside you. You're not only who you've chosen to be, you're also everything you still have the potential to become. And the other, through their presence, provokes that becoming. You don't meet people by accident. You meet living mirrors of your own pieces, and each of them offers you a chance to become more whole, more aware, more true to yourself. Not all love is meant to stay. Some come to break you open, and even so, they are sacred. Because there are encounters that weren't meant to last. They were meant to transform. They arrive like fire, burn away everything that no longer serves, and then they leave. They leave silence, emptiness, longing. But they also leave space. These intense connections that shake your ground are often the self acting through a necessary rupture. The ego craves permanence and safety, but the soul craves truth and movement. And when life gets stuck, love can arrive like an earthquake. A kind of emotional alchemy that reshapes everything inside. You think you've lost someone, but what you really lost was an old version of yourself. A part that no longer fit, but that you couldn't let go of on your own. And that's the role of certain encounters. To destabilize so you can be set free. Not because the other person wanted that, but because the energy of the bond carried that purpose. The pain of a breakup doesn't mean the love was in vain. Quite the opposite. It might be a sign that it fulfilled its purpose. That it did what it came to do, that it brought to the surface what was hidden, that it exposed in all its rawness the fragile, dependent, idealized parts, that it shattered the illusions so something new could be born. It's hard to accept that some stories don't have a happy ending in the traditional sense, but maybe the happy ending is somewhere else, in the clarity that remained, in the strength that emerged, in the expanded awareness. Not every loss is an end. Some are beginnings in disguise. Jung saw this kind of rupture as part of the individuation journey. Emotional collapse can mark the start of internal realignment. When love breaks, it reveals what was misaligned. And by doing so, it prepares the ground for something more authentic, more conscious, more whole. Some people love you so much that, even unknowingly, they accept the role of breaking you, of pushing you out of your comfort zone, of pulling you away from a path that was no longer yours, of forcing you to be reborn. And as painful as that is, it's still a form of love. These encounters aren't flaws in your destiny. They're profound alignments. And when you look at them with emotional maturity, you can see it had to break. Because only through that breaking could something truer be rebuilt. Some people come for just a season. They don't stay, they don't follow you, they don't become part of your daily life. But still, they leave a permanent mark. They serve a purpose, open a door, awaken a part of you that was asleep. And when they leave behind what seems like silence. But with time, it reveals itself as learning. Not every bond is meant to last. Some are just passages. Brief, intense, precise cycles. The soul knows that some presences are only necessary up to a point. After that, staying would mean forcing something that has already ended. The ego clings. The soul understands and lets go. Accepting the end of a cycle doesn't mean denying its value. On the contrary, it's honoring what was lived without needing it to keep existing. Forgiveness is born from that, not as an excuse but as liberation. When you forgive, you release the invisible thread that still ties you to the past. You don't erase what happened, but you stop carrying the weight of what can no longer be changed. To forgive doesn't mean to justify mistakes or ignore pain. It means choosing not to feed what's been making you sick. It means accepting that the other did what they could with the level of awareness they had. And so did you. True forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you and the peace you choose to cultivate within. Gratitude isn't romanticizing. It's acknowledgement. It's looking back and realizing that despite the pain, something shifted, something woke up, something inside you matured, even if it came through tears and silence. Some people taught you through love, others through absence, but all of them in some way contributed to your journey. Life moves in cycles, and every relationship that comes brings a new lesson. Some show you what love is, others what it's not. Some heal, others break. But all of them, without exception, shape you. And when you learn to feel grateful, even for the ones that hurt, something transforms. The anger fades. The attachment weakens. The heart makes room for the new. Not everything has to last to have value. Sometimes all it takes is to recognize, thank you for passing through, even if you didn't stay, and move on, with more lightness, more clarity, more wholeness. Because the soul knows, what came at the right time, and left when the lesson was done. In the end, almost nothing was random. The people who arrived, the ones who stayed, the ones who left, they all, in some way, resonated with something already vibrating inside you. Some came with sweetness, others like a storm. Some lifted you, others broke you apart. But all of them touched you in a way that changed something inside. You attracted what you needed to live, even when it hurt, even when it felt unfair, even when it didn't make sense. The unconscious moves through paths logic can't reach, and that's why, so often, it's only after the dust settles that clarity arrives. The pain becomes a signal, the chaos, a narrative, the other, a mirror. Every encounter carries a purpose, to awaken, to reveal, to teach, to challenge, to heal, to rupture. Sometimes, all of that at once. And recognizing that movement is a sign that something in you has matured. Because when you stop seeing people as luck or punishment and start seeing them as parts of your internal process, the story changes. It leaves the drama behind and steps into awareness. The journey isn't about controlling who enters or who leaves. It's about seeing what each presence came to show you. It's about integrating what was activated, releasing what no longer serves, and welcoming what's still being built. Because it's not about avoiding pain, it's about transforming pain into meaning. Along the way, you found many pieces of yourself reflected in other people's eyes. You saw yourself in the thrill of a beginning, in the anguish of an ending, in the intensity of a projection, in the calm of a true presence. You learned that not every bond needs to last, but every bond can teach. And even the ones that felt like loss were, in truth, passages to a fuller version of you. The unconscious lights up before the touch. The soul recognizes before the name. And all those things that seemed like coincidence were, deep down, reunions with parts of you that had been waiting to be seen, felt, embraced. You didn't meet anyone by chance. Each person was a bridge between who you were and who you can still become. Each story left a mark, not a scar, but a map. And looking now at everything you've lived, maybe you can finally say with a quiet kind of relief, it was worth it. Not because it worked out, but because it revealed something real. Because in the end, every encounter was exactly what it needed to be, an open door into yourself. If this video made sense to you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Here, we talk about connections, the soul, the unconscious, healing, always with depth and never with ready-made formulas. Turn on notifications so you can keep exploring this path with us. And if you've stayed with me until the end, drop a comment below. Nothing was by chance. That way, I'll know this content truly resonated with you. And that somehow, it stirred something inside. See you in the next video.